So today we're looking at politics, and specifically within politics, the authoritarian personality. So after World War II, Adorno, Frenkel-Brunswik, Levinson and Sanford in 1950 attempted to explain the extreme atrocities of the Nazi regime. They explained it through right-wing extremism and saw this as a syndrome of authoritarian personality. This was a landmark study in social and political psychology. Psychodynamic, or Freudian theory of the development of authoritarianism, explained what had happened as being due to two reasons. Firstly, harsh, punitive parenting and rigid parental values cause a tension between anxiety or fear of disapproval and punishment and hostility or anger towards parents. This is known as intrapsychic conflict. And secondly, suppression of impulses leads to displacement of aggression towards safer or weaker targets, such as ethnic minorities. So this work reflects the dynamics of authoritarian submission and aggression. Anti-Semitic attitudes co-vary with other characteristics such as anti-democratic tendencies, ethnocentrism, political and economic conservatism. Adorno et al. Found positive associations between these constructs in survey studies and formed the construction of the California F scale. This was based on interviews looking for common patterns in attitudes, behaviours and histories. So what was the California F scale? There are 9 components to what the F scale was measuring. Firstly, conventionalism, rigid adherence to traditional middle-class norms and values. Secondly, authoritarian submission, submissive, uncritical attitude towards in-group authorities. Thirdly, authoritarian aggression, support for rejection and punishment of people who violate conventional norms. Fourthly, anti-interception, opposition to the subjective, the imaginative. Fifthly, superstition and stereotypy, belief in mystical determinants of individuals' fate. Sixthly, preoccupation with power and toughness, excessive concern with dominance, submission, strong-weak, leader-follower dimensions. Seventhly, destructiveness and cynicism. Destructiveness and cynicism. This is a general hostility towards humanity. Eighthly, projectivity. Outward projection of unconscious impulses leading to dangerous wild beliefs. And lastly, preoccupation with sex. So what are some examples of what these concepts are actually looking at? Well, for conventionalism, an example item would be a person who has bad manners, habits and breeding can hardly expect to get along with decent people. For authoritarian submission, young people sometimes get rebellious ideas, but as they grow up, they ought to get over them and settle down. Authoritarian aggression. Sex crimes such as rape and attacks on children deserve more than mere imprisonment. Such criminals ought to be publicly whipped or worse. Anti-interception. When a person has a problem with worry, it is best for him not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. Superstition. Someday it will probably be shown that astrology can explain a lot of things. Power and toughness. It is best to use some pre-war authorities in Germany to keep order and prevent chaos. Cynicism. Human nature being what it is, there will always be war and conflict. Projectivity. Nowadays, when so many different kinds of people move around and mix together so much, a person has to protect himself especially carefully against catching an infection or disease from them. And sex. The wild sex life of the old Greeks and Romans was tame compared to some of the ongoings in this country, even in places where people might least expect it. These are just some of the example items. Typically, there would be more than one item to measure the subscales and the concept that was being looked at. However, there were some problems with using the F scale, one of which was acquiescent bias. All the items were worded in the same directions. There were no reverse-keyed items. And this meant that when people were completing the interview, that some people tend to agree with all items irrespective of their content, as some people generally just agreeable with whatever an interviewer might propose to them. There was no support for the 9 different factors, and studies that had reversed some of the items obtained low reliability coefficients. Reversing is when some of the items are flipped around, and you would see if the respondent or participant disagree with the items once they've been reversed, which is what you would anticipate if this is actually a view that they hold rather than simply agreeing with everything. Other problems with the theory include that it's only looking at right-wing authoritarianism, and there is no empirical evidence for Freudian or psychodynamic theoretical assumptions. Hope you guys have found this interesting, looking at how the authoritarian personality was constructed and why. Thanks, bye.